You want me to sit here in your seat and move your camera?
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. We're already going.
Okay.
Can I have your attention? Hello? Okay, we're going to get started again, listening to me and not just your group. Okay. I'm just going to, those questions were already answered in the talk, and I was just telling somebody, in order to be a good teacher, you got to make sure that you make sure they didn't miss the important points. All right? And so that's what I'm trying to do. And so even in my homilies, you might find that I'll say, let me say that again. You ever hear a really good line in a homily or a speech, and you're like, dang, I missed it. Yeah. Right? Well, if you're a good teacher, you're going to go, don't let them miss those. Well, anyway, so that's what those questions, they're kind of like stuff that I pretty much already showed. I didn't say anything, though, in the talk about the evangelical counsel.
Right.
Can anybody define those?
Poverty, chastity, and
Obedience. Actually, okay, so did you hear that? She said poverty, chastity, and obedience. Where do those crop up?
religious orders.
Religious orders, that's right. So, but here's the thing. All Christians are called, let me see if I can find that quote from the Catechism. It says, Catechism 9:15, Christ proposes the evangelical counsels in their great variety. So it sounds like it's maybe even more than poverty, chastity, and obedience, but in their great variety, to every disciple. And then it says, the perfection of charity, which is like the funneling in of all of your virtues being perfected, but the perfection of charity, which is the main virtue, and we're going to speak about that, to which all the faithful are called. Okay, and that's why I'm bringing up a second talk today on the perfection of charity, which is the development of the virtues and their perfection. Okay? And that, by the way, when you have developed and perfected your virtues, what are you? You're holy. You're holy. And as Gina would say, you're holy, holy. Sorry, Gina. Actually, you know what's funny?
He started that.
Did I actually start with the wrong tone?
You did it.
You know what's funny?
And she just followed.
Yeah, but you know what's funny is, guys, look, that is the perennial problem with those three words, because somehow we decided to put it in the liturgy with one tune, and then we have this other song that's got a different tune, and you're going to get stuck. And not only, when you're in a small parish, you are not only leading the liturgy in terms of your preaching and all of the, you're also leading the music. And so I finally got myself to where I was leading that song, because I always got mixed up. And for the last year or so, I've been doing that in my parish swimmingly. Until I got here, and maybe I'm a little nervous or something, I don't know, but that came out, and then Gina grabbed onto that, and I said, I gotta stop you. We're not gonna sing Holy, 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 right?
follow the leader.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't even sure that I was the one that started that tune, but it went wrong, and I knew it. Okay. All right, so I was telling you about the evangelical counsels. So it's the perfection of charity to which all the faithful are called, entails for those who freely follow the call to consecrated life, the obligation of practicing chastity in celibacy for the sake of the kingdom, poverty, and obedience. Okay, so what I want to explain is this. Look, religious people, I'm actually not religious. I mean, in the the strict sense of the word, okay? Because religious people belong to a religious order. I don't. I'm a diocesan priest, okay? And that's why I didn't take vows. Diocesan priests don't take vows. But we make promises. Because it's true, there are these things called the evangelical counsels. What does that mean, evangelical? Well, evangelical or evangelism or, this is the gospel. That word means gospel, okay? And counsel is advice. So what's the advice of the gospel? Well, pretty hard to summarize it all, but there are some things that only come from the gospel. Like there's other things about the gospel that, well, you might even find them in other parts of life, or other people talking in these ways. Treat others as you'd have them treat you, things like that. Right? But things that you only find in the gospel are the things that we're going to call the evangelical counsels. And they are, number one, like the rich young man who came and he said, what must I do? What more? Beyond the beyond the laws. And Jesus said, go and sell what you have and give it to the poor and come and follow me. All right? So that's that's an advice of the gospel. Why? Well, here's the thing. It's not just for religious. Dominicans, they're strongly poor. Dominic used to walk around in his bare feet to show everyone that he was not, attached to things of the world. Okay? But, Franciscans, they're very, some of the orders, and they have a lot of different, but they're very austere. Okay? Other ones, anyway, I don't want to go all of them, but you understand the point. What do? They take a vow of poverty. Why? Because the gospel says, renounce the goods of the world. Renounce wealth. Does that apply to you? Let me read the catechism for you one more time. Catechism number 915. Christ proposes the evangelical counsels in their great variety to every disciple. You thought you got a buy on that one?
I have a question, Father.
Yes.
I'm a perennial proofreader, and I think that I goofed, and I think that I tried to correct what I thought was a spelling mistake, but I think that you wrote COUNCSELS, and I thought you meant CILS, like a parish council, like a group of people, but what you're talking about is giving advice, so it should be SEL.
I'm glad we're able to straighten this out because you're not alone. Most Catholics don't understand this concept I'm speaking about right now. I'm giving you some gold. This is important.
So it should be SEL?
Yeah, it's SEL.
Okay.
It's written in the catechism that way.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not like bragging about what I'm saying. I'm just saying that people don't talk about this, but it's something that needs to be addressed. Jesus preached the gospel to everyone. So is it just the religious that are supposed to say, "Oh, I'm gonna, I won't own any property"? Yeah, in that sense, yeah. As Catholics, we're not called to not own property. Those guys, what they're doing is they're taking the evangelical counsels and they're making them very concrete with rules for everyone in the order to follow, so that it's a way of sort of guiding everybody along so that they can head toward holiness together in this, in the same boat together. It'd be kind of like, hey, today's Good Friday. Let's all fast today. Oh, what do you know? That's one of the laws of the church, right? We fast on Good Friday. And actually, I don't know if you realize this is something that's a lost, known thing in the Catholic Church, but that the canon law says that you must do penance how often?
Friday.
That's right. And you guys know that because I've introduced a lot of... No one talks about that anymore. And by the way, here's the thing. I like to get kind of practical so that, we can move forward. I ran out of time on that last talk. And by the way, I'm recording this because I wanted to put that other one on recording. I have a YouTube channel, and so people, watch some of these things. So anyway, hi guys. But I missed the first one. So, but what I was heading to a little bit was a little more practical at the end. Because, we first got to straighten out in our minds, what is the money that God gave us, and how does he want it spent? Right? And how many times do you hear that parable and you haven't really worked that out? And, what I was trying to, I think a very important thing for you to remember from what I said in that earlier talk is this. Will we be evaluated at the end with the final effect of our efforts? Yeah. In other words, will we get to see that we had this effect on salvation of souls and glory of God? Yeah. But we're not going to be able to evaluate those things here in this life. But there are some intermediate things that we kind of can evaluate. And that's what we need to identify. And I named two of them. What were they? See, you want to teach somebody something, you say it again. What were the two? Love, she said, and something else.
Your life.
Holiness. And even those are pretty hard to evaluate. Oh yeah, look, what have you been doing for the last month? I've been loving people and I've been being holy. Like, really? getting more holy, right? You can't, it's hard to evaluate, right? You know, and then you get a little more concrete when you start talking about good works and the proving of virtues, your generosity, your patience, your kindness, your chastity, you know, all those things, right? So now I want to talk about those more concrete things. But first, before we actually do that, I wanted to say that those 4 pillars were kind of this way of saying, I want to be a good Catholic. What should I be doing? I want to be a good Catholic. That's what I wanted this talk. Did it say that on the advertisement? How to be a good Catholic?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to be able to try. Like, you know, you guys might have a difference of opinion on what it really means to be a good Catholic from Father Matt, but it wouldn't hurt you to hear what I think. Okay, this is my job. Try to direct you guys. How do you be a good Catholic? So, I made a list. I'll go over it quick, and then I want to get on to the virtues. Okay? So, number 1, prayer. And that's why I brought up the evangelical councils, actually. You know, for you to take a vow of poverty, that would be like the full extreme. But you don't have to take a vow to work toward poverty, to work toward a life of simplicity, to not buy the $75,000 car because you don't need it. Sorry, I probably just hit somebody in the side just now. Go worry about that. But, you know, or the 3 or 4 or 5 cars you have and the 2 vacation homes and all the time you spend on vacation every year and all the blah, 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 blah. You know what I'm talking about. It's already been bothering your conscience. I'm just pricking it a little bit right now. Okay? So you have an obligation. Why? Because you want to end up holy and glorifying God. But you know the means toward that is to renounce the world. Do you know where to draw the line always? No. It's hard. But religious, they draw the line way up there. But even them, do they somehow get attached to things? Do they, get fooled by the devil and all this stuff? Yeah, of course they do. Okay? But I just want you to address that, it's a misunderstanding to say that those guys are religious. They're worried about poverty. I ain't worried about it. I spend my money how I like, and I earn as much as I want. No, you don't. You need to detach yourself. Okay? It's a good thing for all Christians to listen to that counsel, that advice of the gospel. It's an evangelical counsel. Poverty, chastity as well. Now, I'm called to celibacy. Most of you, I don't think anybody here else is called.Maybe there's somebody, you can talk to me later. But, well, single people for sure. Single people. But I'm just saying, as a promise for life. I've promised for life to be a celibate. Okay? So that's in line with the religious. That we don't budge on those things. But I mean, I'm like the religious too, in that I have a paycheck, but what I'm halfway in between them and you. Because you have a paycheck too, I hope. And I have a paycheck, but I have to figure out how to use my money in an exemplary way to lead you all toward poverty. In the right sense of the word. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. So then there's also chastity. I'm a celibate. You're not, probably. But maybe if you're a single, then you're right in the same boat. Okay? But that itself, what does that do? Detaching yourself from this, carnal pleasures. If it's not just sex, though. It's all of the pleasures. We can go overboard on all of the pleasures. Can we not? And it takes us away from God. So that's why the advice of the gospel is detach yourself from that. And then the last one, poverty, chastity, obedience. Obedience leads to love. And we'll talk about that. There is such a thing called the love of obedience. All right? And we'll get into that for sure on the last talk. But there are certain obediences that God has called us all to. Matter of fact, let me read to you something. I'm going to read you a couple quick things from Catherine of Siena. One of them is where we hone in on what is the fruit. Remember, we're asking, what's the money? how's it spent? The fruit is how it's spent, what it produces, right? The return, I should say, on your money, on God's money. And God says this. He says, the reason why I bring it up now is because it gets back into obedience. You realize because you've been given a human life and grace, you're Christians, right? You're held accountable for all that. Did you realize that there are people in hell that are in different, if there's different levels in heaven, different levels in hell too. Where are the Christians going to be in hell? At the top, because God was like, well, at least you tried hard. You know, you were a Christian and you didn't make it. No Hawaiian punch for you. That guy over there gave me that one. Chuck one time said, you know what a lot of people think? They think that life is a cakewalk. And then when you get to heaven, you get your Hawaiian punch to go with your cake. Okay, so
It's not?
that. And so no, like you go to hell, there's different levels. Where are the Christians?
Probably at the
Bottom.
They're in the worst spot. Why? Because they were given so much. Okay? So there's a responsibility. This is what stewardship's about. It's about responsibility and obedience. You like that word, obedience? Probably not too much. It kind of jabs you a little bit, doesn't it? Obedience. So God says this to Catherine of Siena. And I, because I'm going to probably be quoting her a lot more, but why do I use her? Well, number one, like I said, I'm not that well read, but I happen to have come across somebody that's worth listening to, so I'm going to use it a lot. If I have an idea that I want to figure out theologically, often all I need to do is do a word search in this document called the Dialogue, where God the Father spoke to Catherine of Siena while she was in the midst of an ecstasy. And he revealed all these things. You're like, well, yeah, but he already revealed them through his son in the gospel and everything. Yeah, but you know what? He went further. Because we don't understand all that. And he wanted to explain it even better. So if you haven't read the Dialogue, you're missing out. I told that to Scott Hahn one time. He hadn't read the Dialogue.
Really?
But I don't know if I got him to move. Anyway. So he says, we actually have a debt. Being a human being, and especially a Christian. You have a debt. And what is that debt? He says, when they have rendered what is due to me and to themselves, they proceed to render to their neighbor their principal debt. And by the way, and rendered to themselves. So first, rendered to him. What do we owe God? If it's the top of your head, what do you owe God?
Everything. My heart. Love.
Everything.
My life.
Glory and praise. Glory and praise. Okay? And our part on the salvation of souls. Okay, that's what you owe to God. But what do you owe yourself? He says, and to themselves. They've given their due, what they owe to themselves. This is justice, right? Somebody with the virtue of justice wants to give everybody what they owe them, what they're due them. What do you owe yourself? Christmas presents? I remember my brother one year said, he showed up with some new thing at Christmas. He's like, yeah, well, we've been out buying everybody presents. He says, I realize I need to buy myself a Christmas present. I'm like, I get it. You ever have people do that? You probably did it yourselves. I'm jabbing you again. Sorry. Buy yourself a Christmas present. No, what do you owe yourself? You want to be good to yourself? They say love yourself, right? How do you love yourself? Well, it's a separate category, loving God. Love yourself. How do you love yourself? You give yourself virtue. You give yourself virtue and holiness. Then you're valuable to everybody else. You're valuable to the glory of God. You're valuable to the salvation of souls. You're valuable to everybody you meet because you're able to love them. So you give yourself first the ingredients to love, which are the virtues. Right? By the way, do you think, who are the most lovable people in the world? People with virtue. If you get married and you want to love your spouse, start with getting the virtues. Then you can love your spouse. And you'll become lovable. Boy, what a lovable guy that is. Right? He's full of virtue. It's like Jesus. He was so lovable. They even wanted to kill him. So don't get it wrong like that. Just because you became lovable that everybody's necessarily going to love you. They're not. But you got to make yourself lovable. And that's by having virtue. That's giving yourself what you owe yourself, Susan.
How do you give, can you separate virtue and great? How do you give yourself virtue? Because
Uh,
it's not like grace.
Okay, we're going to get into that. So yeah, I'll answer that in a while.
Tough one.
Yeah, okay. Now, so then he says, they proceed to render, right? When they have rendered what is due to me and themselves. So like it's like a prerequisite. You want to render what you owe other people? He says, when they have rendered to me. So in other words, can you really love people if you don't love God? No. A lot of people think so. They're running around to all the soup kitchens. And they're like, oh yeah, you know how many people I fed this year? And we've been making meals on wheels and blah, 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 blah. I said, did you go to church?
No.
Crickets. It's impossible. And we're going to go over that. Why? Because the trunk of the tree, and we're going to talk about it in a minute, is charity. Where does charity come from? It's a perfect virtue. Charity. It comes from God. Okay? But you can't get it unless you go to God first. Okay? And you can't give anything to anybody in terms of love until you first love yourself, which is not Christmas presents or hot dogs. I know you guys love I love hot dogs too. But but it is it is giving yourself the virtues, okay, and working toward your own holiness, right? Then you're able to give. So he says, they proceed to render to their neighbor their principal debt of love. And then get this. And the very next thing he announces is and of humble and continuous prayer, which all should pay to each other. So to start with, what do you owe your neighbor? You owe prayer for your neighbor. Those hermits are not, doing too bad in that area. Spending all their time praying for people. Right? It says, and then he says, and further, the debt of doctrine. By the way, I have a little acronym for this, and I'm sure some of my little disciples out there can name it right now. What is my acronym? PDE. Prayer, doctrine, and an example of a holy and honorable life. Because that's what came from this quote. So let me finish the quote. So it says, and further the debt of doctrine. You thought that you were actually preach the gospel at all times and where necessary use words. Francis of Assisi. Anybody knows that actually St. Francis of Assisi? No. You guys need to tear that thing down. Sorry, Father. No, we don't know. It might be St. Francis. But here's the thing. You know what that leads you into? That's all you do is give your example. Notice how God, so like in other words, do you preach the gospel? When you go over to your, the full family in Christmas, and somebody brings up homosexuality, and you keep your mouth shut? Okay? They're bringing it up. You keep your mouth shut. Why? Because you want to get along? Go along, and you can get along? All that, right? And you say, but no, I preach the gospel with all my actions. Just the other day, they tried to give me back too much money at the cash register, and I gave it back to them. I was honest. You know what? You deserve a reward. I mean, a trophy. But it's not just example. It's actually doctrine. Doctrine is teaching. It's words. Okay? God's very explicit. When he made the list, he didn't just say, preach the gospel, and then leave it up to you. He actually said, and further, he starts with love, right? He says, once you've given me what you owe me, once you gave yourself what you owe yourself, he says, then they render to their neighbor their principal debt of love and of humble and continuous prayer, so starting with prayer, and then which all should pay to each other, and further the debt of doctrine, PD, the debt of doctrine. And if you thought that your doctrine was all hidden in your example, then he explicitly says, and the example of a holy and honorable life. Counseling and helping others according to their needs for salvation. And at some place he said anything else that they might need. So if they need some food or whatever, some clothing, then you give it to them. But really your mind is set on salvation because that's what God's mind is set on. You see what I'm saying? So he says PDE, prayer, doctrine, and an example of a holy and honorable life. That's how you love people, through your virtues. Let me say that again. You all owe. PDE, prayer, doctrine. And what is doctrine? It's speaking. You know, you're in an elevator with someone and they say something that sounds a little bit crazy in terms of the truths of the universe, and you speak the truth in kindness. Okay? Because it might help them. They might not like it at that moment, but it might help them. So you're always on the prowl. Right? So prayer, doctrine, and an example. Because your example is probably more powerful than the doctrine, I agree. Especially if you're not that great at doctrine. But you're not exonerated. I'm not that great at doctrine. I understand. Keep trying. Study, all this stuff, right? But you're not exonerated. Prayer, doctrine, and an example of a holy and honorable life. You owe that to everybody around you, especially your kids. An example of a holy and honorable life, right? And then it says, counseling them and helping others. And actually in another place, God says, counseling them as you would counsel yourselves. I brought that up recently in one of my homilies. As you would counsel yourselves. In other words, if you said to yourself, oh, look what they're doing. Is that a mortal sin? Dang, I better run from that. He's saying that when you counsel people, you counsel them as you would counsel yourself. If somebody, you know somebody that's involving themselves in mortal sins, are they going to get irritated with you? Of course they will. But you would counsel yourself, wouldn't you? You'd say, I better run from that. It's a mortal sin. That's what he's saying. Okay? So, and then he says, and helping others according to their needs for salvation, the soul renders fruit of grace and utility to her neighbor. Wow. He's actually saying the fruit. The soul renders fruit. Remember I was asking, what's the fruit? He says, of grace and utility to her neighbor. So in other words, you're leading them to receive grace. You don't have grace. You're not providing grace. But you're leading them to grace. Grace and utility. Okay, you're useful. For what? Their salvation. That was the crux of the whole thing. Are they hungry? Yeah, get them that too. They need some clothes? Yeah, get them that too. Whatever. All those things, right? And that's all part of your loving them and proving your virtue on them. But you're on a mission for the most important stuff, which is their salvation. You're on the prowl. Okay? And then he says, according to the zeal, so the soul renders fruit of grace and utility to her neighbor, according to the zeal of those who come to receive fruit from my servants. So, if you got kids and you've done your best, and you keep giving them you keep giving them PDE all the way up and down, and they still won't convert, and they won't go to church, and they won't read their Bible, you're not in trouble. Some people think they're in trouble. They're busted. I know that a lot of Hispanics think that they can't go to communion because their son is living in mortal sin. That's not true. It's not your fault, necessarily. Maybe. I don't know. Right? But he says here, according to the zeal of those who come to receive fruit from my servants. In other words, it's dependent on them too, on their interest. You know, I knock on a lot of doors in Quincy, but some people don't want to hear it. I can't help that. And then it says, and to me, renders this, and then he says, and to me she renders the sweet odor of glory and praise to my name, and so fulfills the object of her creation. And you're thinking about fruit, you're thinking about a return on the investment of God, and he starts talking about the object of her creation, you know you're on the right little paragraph. You know what I'm saying? He just said it right there. When you do this PDE, and you give yourself first the virtues, and you give me, render me glory, and all the obedience you owe to me, and he says, then you will have fulfilled the object of your creation, the purpose of your creation. Okay, that's what he wants. We heard earlier, to become a son of God, a child of a daughter of God. That's what it means. Holiness, love. So we're going to get into that. Holiness and love and faith. By the way, what do you think Jesus' favorite word was?
Amen.
Kingdom, the kingdom of heaven.
I think it was faith. He's faith. Go. Go, your faith has saved you. Faith, faith, faith. Look at the faith of this person. Look at the faith, 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 faith. Right? So it's pretty important. You better not forget faith in this whole picture of what you're going to do to give God a return. You need to build up your faith. Faith is the response. It's called the obedience of faith. That's where you respond with action because of your faith. Jill.
I was reading, the Divine Will of Teresa. Jesus even said, or God said, that we steal from Him when we don't to use what He's given us.
Yeah. Can everybody hear that? She said that another mystic who has writings from Jesus, Luisa Picaretta, she said that Jesus said that when you don't do the things that you're supposed to do, like for good stewardship, being a good Catholic, you steal from me. That's why he uses the word owing a debt. So I know a lot of people don't think of it in these terms, but it's what it is. It's the truth. It's a debt. You have a debt. That's why he used stewardship in terms of the talents and in terms of making it an investment and wanting a return. It's his stuff. Everything's his. So he expects a return. Okay, so now one last thing. So we're going to get into lunch at noon. So we're running out of time. I really want to get into the virtues. So, but real quickly, that was a really important passage though. I want you to remember that. PDE. Okay, that's how you love your neighbor. You love God first, then yourself, then PDE. All right, so, how do I integrate that in with the evangelical counsels? Well, if you're trying to do all those things to give God a return, you know that you've got to be a strategic person. And the gospel gives you strategy. You know, is somebody going to go to hell because their house was worth $1.2 million? And they're like, look at that house, thing was worth $1.2 million. You're going to hell. Not exactly. Not exactly. But one thing does lead to another. In other words, thou liest. You're a Ciceronian. You love philosophy and doing this and being great and all this stuff, right? And your wealth can do that to you. So you see the picture here? Is that here you are, you're trying to be a good steward of the gifts and make a return on God's money, but you've also got to be a strategist. Remember there was a parable on stewardship, and it was called the dishonest steward. Why was he commended? Remember that?
He's a strategist.
Because he was a strategist. You know, you don't get to just go to your judgment one day and, I know, Lord, I should have done this, this, and this, but I never got around to all that stuff. I just made sure I always loved everyone. Yeah, a lot of people, you know, what's Jesus' favorite word? Love! Yeah, no, faith in the word. Did you hear the word? Did you respond obediently to that word? Okay? Love will result. Especially if you go after holiness. Okay? But there's an obedience involved here. Obedience is part of our... Now listen to this too. So this is another quote. And I just want you to hear this because this is part of reality. And God's given us gold through St. Catherine. So listen to this. I will continue to speak of the obedient and of the disobedient together. Of the obedience in general, which is the obedience of the precepts, and in particular, which is that of the counsels. So in other words, there's the precepts of the law. I heard a good preacher the other day. They said, how do I know what God's will is? He says, it's the law. You start there. You want to know what God's will is? Make sure you don't miss any of the law. The precepts. And then it says, and in particular, so in general, the precepts, and in particular, the counsels. Okay? Poverty, chastity, and obedience. In other words, all the things that the gospel uniquely calls you to be a strategist. You get me? You know, those guys those Franciscans, those guys are dirty little rats. They're doing all these strategies to try to get themselves into heaven. right? Better than us. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. But they are strategists, aren't they? Right? You know, that's the what do you call it? The dishonest steward. Yeah, he unfairly used the stuff of his master for his own benefit. But God's saying to you, you need to use everything at your disposal to get yourself to heaven. Are you really trying? Use everything you have at your disposal. Devotionals, just everything. Okay? But particularly when you have to renounce things. So listen to this. So God says, you are all in general by my truth. No, sorry, I jumped. So it says, precepts and counsels, right? General, particular. The whole of your faith is founded upon obedience. Whoa. You think Protestants talk like that? The whole of your faith is founded on obedience. Okay? And then it says, for if you, it says, for by it you prove your fidelity. I told you, you want to get away from proof? That's not in the Catholic faith. It's not in reality. God wants you to prove things. Did you realize that God even made the Blessed Virgin Mary prove herself? Did you ever wonder why? Do you ever wonder, she's conceived immaculately. She's not inclined to sin. How the heck did she ever prove herself?
By saying yes.
Saying yes after she's already holy and perfect. Did you ever wonder about that? Read Luisa Picaretta. Jesus explained that one. It's pretty fascinating. God actually infused in the Blessed Virgin Mary total knowledge. She was like an adult at the moment of her conception. Purportedly. This is private revelation. She was like an adult, and she was offered the divine will in place of her own will. And she, like an angel who must accept everything all in one moment, she did. But Jesus says, nobody can come to me without being proven. And she too had to be proven. That's fascinating, isn't it? She had to be proven. And you have to be proven too. And Jesus and God the Father says, your faith is founded upon obedience, and for by it you prove your fidelity. And then he says, you are all in general, by my truth, to obey the commandments of the law, the chief of which is to love me above everything, and your neighbor as yourself. And the commandments are so bound up together that you cannot observe or transgress one without observing and transgressing all. Okay, I don't really know how to explain that other than put yourself into mortal sin and see how well you fare against all the other temptations. You're in trouble. People don't realize that. Okay, and then it says, he who observes this principal commandment to love me and your neighbor observes all the others. He is faithful to me and his neighbor, for he loves me and my creature, and is therefore obedient, becoming subject to the commandments of the law and to creatures for my sake, and with humble patience endures every labor, and even his neighbor's detraction of him. So you put up with a lot of stuff to be obedient to God. Okay? And then he says, the obedience is of such excellence that you all derive grace from it. If you want to receive grace, be obedient. Okay? And then he says, just as from disobedience you all derive death. And then he says, wherefore, it is not enough that you should be only in word and not practiced by you. I have already told you that this word is the key which opens heaven. Which key practiced by you. I think what he's saying here is that it's not enough to say, oh yeah, I love the Lord. Many will call out, Lord, Lord, on the last day. But only those who do the will of my heavenly Father will enter into the kingdom of heaven. Remember that? And by the way, that's one of my pieces of advice to you, is to memorize some scripture. That's a big one right there. That's like Matthew chapter 7, I think, verse 21 or something. many will cry out on that last day, Lord, Lord. How many people do we know that are like that? They're like, oh yeah, they're not at a stewardship retreat, and they wouldn't want to hear what I have to say because I'm getting very concrete about stuff you got to do. They keep everything all into cloudy, nebulous land. Right? And they say, what's most important is to be a good person. You ever heard that one before?
No.
Or am I the only one ever heard that?
Just yesterday, yeah.
What counts, when you get there to your judgment, you got to be a good person. Okay, I agree. You do need to be a good person. What's the definition? You're nice. You're nice. Nice guys,
Finish last.
they might finish last. They might. Some nice guys finish first, though. Right. But anyway, Jesus clarified. He said, many are already on my team, they think. They're going to call me Lord. He's going to come floating in on the clouds, right? And then there's going to be tons of people. It's the Lord, Lord, Lord. He said, I don't know you. Why not? Because you didn't do the will of my Father. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's very important for us as we develop our response. It's the obedience of faith. Faith to what? Not just, here's the thing. I'm sorry. This is taking a long time. I'm sorry.
Keep going.
But here's the thing. There's a ton of people out there that they like the idea of Christianity. It's a great idea, by the way. You got Jesus. He's super nice. And you got heaven. Who wouldn't like that? Jesus, heaven. I have faith, they say. I believe in Jesus. I believe in heaven. And then they create this whole box around that. Just the idea. But all the specifics are theirs. With their mind. And this is the way things got to be. Why? Because the Bible's messed up. They screwed that up. So is the church. It's all corrupt. So, but Jesus is going to say, only those who do the will. How do you know what his will is? Can you figure that out just by staying home? No. You got to get your Bible. You got to go to church. You got to figure this out. You got to hear what God said and be faithful to that. You prove your fidelity by your obedience. God loves it. He loves obedience. He loves fidelity to his word, to something concrete that's outside of you. Okay? So, finishing this off, though, and this is a really important passage. This is why I'm sharing it. So he says this. He says, wherefore, it is not enough that it should be only in word and not practiced by you. You've got to prove yourself. And he says, I have already told you that this word is Jesus, is the key which opens heaven. Jesus and all of his doctrine is what opens heaven for you. And he says this, which key my son placed in the hands of his vicar. Who's that?
Peter.
That's right, the Pope. And he said, this victor placed it in the hands of everyone. It's a key that opens a door. Placed it in the hands of everyone who receives holy baptism, promising therein to renounce, what do you think? When you do the renewal of your vows, it always says that, doesn't it?
Yes.
Do you renounce Satan and all of his evil ways and all that, right? What did God the Father say in Catherine of Siena? He said this. He says, promising therein to renounce the world and all its pomps and delights and to obey. Okay? In other words, get the strategy together. You got to renounce the world. So really, I find it interesting that when God summarizes obedience and he starts talking about your baptism, you're thinking vows, right? You've got vows that you must fulfill. Remember, we do that every Easter?
Yep.
You stand up, and I'm going to, these are my vows, these are my promises, right? Why? Because there's a covenant, and we're in the new covenant, and God's got his part. He says, I'm going to bring you to heaven, but what do I got to do? I got to be faithful to my vows, and the vows are to renounce Satan. But here's the thing, it's not just Satan. There's three of them. The world, the flesh, and Satan. Yeah, world, the devil, whatever. I don't know what order it is, but you got me, right? So, but that's what the evangelical councils are about. They're for everyone. You've got to renounce the world. You want to obey? You got to renounce the world and all of its pomps and delights to some degree. Am I saying that you can't have cherry pie every so often and maybe a little bit of Hawaiian punch? No, but it's something to discern, right? It's a strategy to get you there. Okay? All right, so now, running out of time, I really wanted to do a big thing on virtue. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to name this list of things that, because this is the most practical thing I've said all day. Because I've promised you a little bit of practicality. So here it is. Number 1, prayer. And prayer that involves the obedience of faith. Okay. So I want you to reflect on that in your prayer. How am I being obedient to what I've heard in the Word of God? Okay. Number two. Actually, I missed. It's number 3. I'm jumping to 3. Receiving the sacraments regularly. Holy Eucharist, daily Mass if possible. I recommend it. Is it necessary for salvation? No. But I recommend daily Mass. Adoration of the Holy Eucharist. It's an essential part. You got to go and show the Lord how thankful you are for the food that came from heaven. We're in a crisis right now in the church because Jesus, anyway, I'll go off. So I'm going to keep going. Rosary, Blessed Virgin Mary, Dominic, they all showed us how powerful it is. You need to use it. Rosary. Somebody was just saying, I don't care if you're atheist, you need to pray your rosary. Who did I just hear that? Do you guys hear that? I know who it was. It was Father Blount. You know who Father Blount is? Yeah, he's like, I don't care if you're atheist. Get your rosary out. Okay. And then he's telling people that he's like, praying just the Our Father and the Hail Mary for 3 minutes in the day. He says, that's good for 2.5-year-olds. You're older than that. Imagine a 2.5-year-old praying. All right. And daily meditation. Yeah. Daily meditation. Take some time. If your prayer life is nothing but Our Fathers and Hail Marys, it's not everything it needs to be. You need to talk to God and listen. Talk to God and listen. You may want to use the scriptures to lead you in that. What do they call that?
Lectio Divina.
Lectio Divina. Or whatever. Maybe a holy book. Maybe the Diary of St. Faustina. Read a couple lines, but don't just read. Read a couple lines and then reflect and see if it's saying something to you. Because if it is, guess who's talking? Probably God. And you talk to him. Okay, that's key. Number 4. I know I don't have a number 2 on this list, but that's the way it works. Number 4. Hearing the whole message of the Word of God and attempting to understand and respond with faith. How many people take no care to find out what the whole message is of God and the teachings of the church? How many people do I encounter today that I've even heard that people didn't even know that fornication is a sin? Like Catholics. They didn't know that they couldn't get divorced and remarried without an annulment or a death. And they thought that I didn't know that. Well, you know why you didn't know it? Because you lifted no finger. So find out what the whole Word of God is. You can't be that person that builds the picture around the idea of Jesus and heaven and Hawaiian Punch. Right? Right? You don't get to build the picture yourself. Faith is hearing. It's not saying, I had this big thing with my sister recently. She told me, I don't think God's like that. I think God is like this. He's like this, and this, and this, right? And there's no such thing as hell and all this stuff, right? And I told her, I said, you know what? If it were up to us to have to fill in the whole picture, because there wasn't much to go on other than that Jesus is nice and heaven exists, I said, I'd be on your team. I mean, we think alike. I'm like, high five me. But the thing is, we're not on the same team because I understand that I don't get to figure everything out for myself. I have to hear and respond with faith. You guys get that? How many people today? That's one of the biggest problems in the world today. Everyone thinks, and some of you, this is beating a dead horse, I'm sorry. But so many people think that religion and what we do is just a matter of taste. You like the Bible? Well, I like the Quran, and I like Buddha, and I like this, I like that. Oh, I hope you're right. But to them, it doesn't matter who's right. It's all whatever you come up with, and there's all these different paths up to the top. And, I would say it's true. Not everybody has to do the same thing in life to get to heaven. But there's some objectivity here. You've got to hear the word of God and respond to that with faith. Okay. Number 5, and these are all practical things, right? Continually studying your faith. So how many Catholics do you know they've never gone to an adult class in their life? They're not interested. You know, you can go to a parish and you put on all these things. Not interested. You need to be interested. Maybe you don't have to do it at the parish. You could do it online, or you could do this or do that. You could go to another retreat somewhere else or whatever. But you need to study your faith. Memorize some lines of Scripture. When you're going to give doctrine, you got to have something to give. Memorize a couple lines. It's not that hard. Okay? One of the lines that I memorized a long time ago is Paul says to Timothy, but if I should be delayed, you should know how to behave in the household of God, the church of the living God, the pillar and the foundation of the truth. I have it in I can see that, even though I'm nervous up here talking. I'm not that nervous, but you know, why? Now, is that impressive? What's his father Matt? He's like a Protestant. He's got to memorize. No, I only have a couple. I have a couple, but the most important ones, right? You should know how to behave in the household of God, the church of the living God, comma, the pillar and the foundation of truth. What's that telling you? It's telling you that the church is the pillar and the foundation of the truth. And therefore, if you tell me that I must find everything in the Bible, I tell you the Bible itself said that the pillar and foundation of the truth is not the Bible, but it is the Word of God. But it's not just in the Bible. But the point is, it's the church, because it's the church that gives us the whole Word of God and its understanding. Okay? So this is why you're Catholic. If you're Protestant, you figure a bunch of Bibles fell out of the sky, and everybody went and grabbed one and ran home with their own Bible. And they're carrying out this command of God, you know. I'm going to read my Bible. The Bible is great. But remember, the pillar and the foundation of the truth is the church. I only bring that all up just to show you. I memorized it. Why? Because I found myself trying to refer to that all the time when I'm talking to people. I'm out there in, you know, Save More or whatever store, and I start talking to somebody. I'm like, doesn't it say this? And then, you know, finally I'm like, dang, I need to just remember this. And so I would read it. Okay, I got it. Okay? You know, another one that you might want to do? Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road broad that leads to destruction. People need to know about that, right? And that whole thing I told you about YouTube to build a bathroom. Okay? But we don't do YouTube and, you know, all that when it doesn't come to bathrooms. When it comes to God, you need to remember, enter through the narrow gate. So all the people around you, they don't go to church on Sunday, so don't look to them. You get me? Okay. So memorize Scripture. Regular penance. Oh, Father, you just jabbed me. When do we have to do penance? Didn't I ask you that already?
Freddie.
Every day of Lent and all of the Fridays of the year, unless it's a solemnity. And if there's a feast on a Friday, my opinion is don't do a mortification, but do a positive penance. Say an extra prayer, help somebody out. Something you might not do, but you're going to do out of a dying to yourself. Okay? So penance is a whole other category. I won't go into it right now, but don't think that... I will say this. It appears that the church forgot about penance. It really does. If you look back to 1917 and the Code of Canon Law and what we used to have to do as Catholics, and somehow in 2023 we've advanced, I don't think so. We only have to do 2 days of fasting in the year, Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. But in the past, you had to fast every single day of Lent. That was obligatory. Okay? Now here's the thing too. We used to not eat meat on Fridays, and now as a law. But why? It was because the church said, you know what? Like Father Matt says, we got to be strategists, so we got to have some concrete things that we demand of our people so that they're on their pathway to produce fruit. And And so it said we're just gonna tell them concretely. Your penance, which is due every Friday, is going to be not eating meat. But at some point in the 60s, the United States, the USCCB, said, you know what, let's lift that. But let's tell them that they need to do a penance of their own choice. And so what? You know what happened? Everyone heard the part about let's lift that. But the part where you need to now replace it with your own choice of a penance got totally lost. So you need to do a penance, and I bet you, I'm not asking for hands, but I bet you 50% of you don't already do a penance every Friday. So you're lucky you heard me tell you that, because even though you don't like the idea of it, it's going to do you some good. You need to do a penance and unite yourself to Christ and his passion every Friday. Okay? And then every day of Lent. By the way, is it hot in here?
Yes.
What's going on? Oh, they're cooking in here. Okay. Okay, my last, listen up. So practicalities, number 7, contributing to the church. Time, talent, and treasure. But see, this was only one, this is number 7. This isn't everything, but your time, talent, and treasure to the church. And then there's the ministries in the parish. You should consider that you are part of that. You need to do ministry. You want to bear fruit? You need to do some ministries. There's plenty of ministries in the parish. Liturgical ministry, catechetical ministry, finance, social justice, the pro-life movement. And here's the thing. I'm even going to say this, but I don't know that everyone's going to be called up to every one of these. But I will say this. There is a public fight for those who have knowledge of the kingdom and the truths of our faith, to fight against the confusions of our society. So, is the pro-life movement the effort toward that? Of course it is. That's one of the biggest confusions of our modern day, is that half of our people in the world actually think that it's okay, in fact, it's a right for a woman to be able to kill the baby in the womb. Like, really? I mean, but it's a confusion, and it's our duty to give doctrine toward the contrary. Okay? When we can. All right? But I'm going to name 6 things. Number 2, and please don't get mad about this, but be open to the possibility. COVID, injustices, and hysteria. Confusion City. LGBT, confusion to the max. Especially T lately. BLM and reverse racism. Confusion. Climate change extremism. Don't say, Father, you sound like a Republican right now. I know, they're kind of on the same side as me on these things, but I'm the one that had to side first. These are all things that deal with truth and justice. Okay? Climate change extremism. And number 6, so I'm telling you, remember, what am I saying right now? I'm giving you a list of things that you might have to include in your doctrine toward your neighbor out of love. Okay? But don't take me to be saying that you must go start a revolution on all these things publicly, or you're not going to heaven. I didn't say that. But the last one, the false teachings being proliferated by the church. Yuck. You know that's the truth? The church itself is corrupt. And if you don't recognize it, and you say, Father, you're being unfaithful by saying that, you've got the wool being pulled over your eyes. The church is corrupt right now. Okay? Even if it's only one priest in the world, you got to fight that. If that priest is saying the wrong thing, you know? Father Martin. What's his first name?
Father James Martin.
Yeah, he's given us all kinds of untruths. Okay? And so, unfortunately, so is a lot of the Vatican. And all this stuff going on with the Synod of Synodality. Okay? You better be ready to recognize what's not the truth. I'm just telling you. I'm being a good doctrine guy myself right now. I'm sharing the truth with you. Be ready to recognize some untruth, even coming out of the Vatican right now. Jill?
There's a distinction. Holy Mother Church, the spotless bride of Christ, is incorruptible, but it's the institutional part of the church that's...
Well, yeah, there's the fallibility of mankind. And here's the thing. The church is the bride of Christ, and it's divine. So that's why when you start naming things in the creed, you realize the church is in the creed. The church itself, to believe in the church. Some people don't even realize that. The church is a
Holy.
mystical reality that deserves faith. You have to have faith in it. However, you also must recognize the limitations of the interchange of God's work and humanity, which is sinful. So the church it's got corruption. Has it always had corruption? Yeah, to some degree, but it's getting bad. Getting real bad. Okay? So I'm just saying, I named, there's many more, but I named 6 things. They're actually kind of signs that were near end times. Oh, sorry guys. They're strong signs.
Let's go for another hour.
They're strong signs, right? But these are the mass confusion. We've never been this confused in the history of the world. Of those 6 things that I just named.
Father, I have 5.
So I'll name them again. Number 1, that there's something called abortion rights. Number 2, COVID injustices and hysteria. Number 3, the LGBT. Number 4, BLM and reverse racism. And number 5, climate change extremism. Keep in mind, climate change. Nobody's saying that the climate's not changing. Have I seen where the poles are melting and stuff like that? Yeah. Is it weird? If anything, it's a sign of the sinfulness of the world. Yeah. But the fact that it would fool us into believing that we need to stop raising cattle is a sign also that we're sinful. Because it's just like the sinfulness of the Tower of Babel. What was the result? Confusion. God confused them. He's doing the same thing to us right now. That's what we reap from what we've sown in our sinfulness, confusion. And so it's nothing but a sign of all that. So you, my friend, be a source of light and truth. Okay? All right. The last thing, good works in general and ministry that might be outside the church. I named the ministries in the church and all that. And that's a great avenue for you. You should look there first. You want to go to jail ministry? Well, go ask your priest. Are we going to the jail? And if he says no, well, then you go do it. Okay? Jail, whatever. Ministry to the poor, prison, the sick, and so forth. Okay. So that was all the practicalities. I didn't actually get to the development and the perfection of the virtues. And I know you want to hear that. So somehow we've got to get that done before you go today. So I think, though, it's 10 to 12. I think it's time for you to look at those questions real quick that we made for the second session. Actually, you know what? They're applying to what I was going to preach about, that I'm going to preach about next. So I think what we do then now is you guys can review what I said just in this last talk among yourselves so that you don't leave here empty. And then we'll have lunch. And then what time did we say we were going to do the second talk? Or the third talk, sorry.
1:15.
Okay, so lunch is from 12. I want to cut that. I'm just going to say we're going to start the next talk at 12:45. All right? So we're going to have lunch at 12. Can we do that, by the way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We'll have lunch at 12. And then we're going to we'll finish lunch at 12:45. You can go pray. You can go pray during that time if you want. And then I'm going to do my next talk, and I'm going to try to do a catch-up job on the just a sec, on the virtues. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is the laborers of the vineyard parable. Okay? So what were you going to say?
Well, when they need my daytime prayers, we printed out the liturgy of the hour.
Oh, okay.
For you to lead.
All right, well, we could do that. We're going to have to do that at 12:35. How's that? We'll have 10 minutes for that. So you guys will have 12 to 12:35 to have your lunch. Okay? And then we'll do the liturgy of the hours at 12:35. Everybody okay?
Yeah.
I'm having a good time.
Thank you, Father.
Okay.